Obama wants lawmakers to renew and expand it. Other measures Obama wants Congress to take up include limiting high-capacity ammunition magazines and requiring background checks for all gun buyers in an attempt to close the so-called gun show loophole that allows people to buy guns at trade shows and over the internet without submitting to background checks. The occupier also intends to seek confirmation of B. Todd Jones, who's been serving as the acting director of the ATF since 2011. The occupier's plan does little to address violent images in video games, movies, and entertainment, beyond asking the CDC to study their impact on gun crimes. Some pro-gun lawmakers, who are open to addressing the stricter arms legislation, have insisted they would do so only in tandem with recommendations for addressing violence in entertainment. The president's long list of executive orders also include... Now, do you see how that's reported right there? Again, using president, and then they say executive orders. But until now, everyone's been very careful to simply refer to it as executive actions. There were only 3 orders in the whole list of 23. But now they want to, as you move down here, start slipping in the wordage to make you think that there's power and authority here. These list of executive actions also include ordering tougher penalties for people who lie on background checks and requiring federal agencies to make relevant data available to the federal background check system. Ending limits that make it more difficult for the government to research gun violence, such as gathering data on guns that fall into criminal hands. Not real sure what those limits are, but be interesting to see what it is that they think is in the way. Usually for the progressives, that typically means the Constitution. I'll continue now. Requiring federal law enforcement to trace guns recovered in criminal investigations. I think discussing this yesterday, what are we really talking about here? Are we now demanding that the feds get involved in every single gun crime across America, whether it's been a federal jurisdiction previous to this or not? Because that's what it sounds like. Giving schools flexibility to use federal grant money to improve school safety, such as by hiring school resource officers. Well, the resource officers are hired by most of the school systems that want them, so it seems like crap there too. An excuse to waste more taxpayer dollars. And also, along the list, is giving communities grants to institute programs to keep guns away from the people who shouldn't have them. Like who? The average law-abiding citizen? Because that's who it sounds like you keep targeting here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Tap Into the Truth. Thanks for staying with us. Now we're going to get to the topic of the night, and that is, according to a report that I came across today, this comes from the Health Impact News, and it cites the Federal Register for this information. Although just so that you know, the Federal Register had no specific references to the anthrax vaccine in the cited material. At any rate, it appears that the Obama administration is seeking approval to conduct morally questionable, to say the least, wholly non-therapeutic medical experiments that would expose healthy children to risk of serious harm. Specifically, the Department of Health and Human Services is seeking to test the highly controversial, highly dangerous anthrax vaccine on children. For over a year, the Commission has been attempting to find a rationale for endorsing a proposed government policy that would violate fundamental medical ethics principles mandated under the Nuremberg Code after the atrocities committed under the Nazi regime came to light. Under U.S. law, research involving greater than minimal risk and no prospect of direct benefit to the individual child subject is prohibited in healthy children. If not stopped, the U.S. government would override ethical and legal prohibitions by testing medical countermeasures on unprotected children who are legally incapable of giving informed consent. The government would subject healthy but socioeconomically deprived American children to unjustifiable risk of harm to be exploited as a human guinea pig. Now, ladies and gentlemen, does this sound like somebody who's really for the children? Hell, I'm for the children to be a guinea pig. If this report is true, and like I've said, I've seen it circulating, I caught it early, actually I caught it late last night, seen it making its way around to a lot more places. It seems to be legitimate. How on earth can any individual with a clear conscience allow this kind of activity to go on in your administration? I mean, there's one thing if you don't know about it, but at this point, how could he not? The great occupier, the man who's taking action, shredding our Constitution little by little every single day, has a plan for our children. He's protecting them from gun violence so he can use them to improve vaccines so that him and his intellectual elite Marxist regime can stay healthy in the event that they have to use anthrax against the American people. Okay, I'm a little over the top there. I've got no evidence to back that up, but you know what? We've seen other dictators do exactly that in the past, utilizing biological and chemical weapons on people that live within their own borders. We've seen it. We know it happens. And if you think for a second that this person is above it, think again. Because what's going to happen when the march to take our guns continues to step forward? Do you think that everybody's just going to hand them over? No, of course not. Have you ever been in the country? If you're out there and you're living in some big metropolis and you don't have to worry about dealing with us backwoods redneck farmer types, then you're in for a surprise if you think they're just going to hand over their guns. You're in for a surprise if you think they're going to just show up to register them. Because guess what? Again, excuse me. It's just not going to happen. I know here in Tennessee, I know in Alabama, I know in Georgia, I know in Louisiana, I know in a big part of Florida, I know in a big part of South Carolina, probably the biggest part of North Carolina, hell, in fact, in Kentucky, I know in Arkansas, I know in Texas, which, you know, they're the West, they're not the South. But I know in the southern states and in several of the western states, the backwoods, self-sufficient farmers and ranchers and downright redneck country folk are not going to just roll over and hand over guns. They will stand up for what is their constitutional right, and somebody somewhere is going to start shooting. And when that happens, the news is going to call these folks terrorists. The news is going to portray these people as the bad guy. And the news is going to portray the anointed one, the occupier, as freaking Abraham Lincoln Part 2. And I know I'm not the first person to say this, but what I am going to do is ask you a serious question. Why do you think Hollywood has had this big renewal in trying to portray Lincoln? I mean, you've got the Abraham Lincoln movie. You even had Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. You've had other Lincoln-related movies of lesser stature. Why? Because now they want to remind you that even though he was a Republican, and it was actually the Republican Party formed in opposition to slavery, the Republicans who ended slavery in this country, they want to remind you that he accomplished this by ignoring the will of the majority of the people. He did this by ignoring Congress. He did this by illegally and unconstitutionally declaring martial law. They want to portray this man in this fashion. They want you thinking in terms of what it's going to take to keep the nation together. But this man, if he's not directly responsible, then he sees the reports. He knows that one of his secretaries working over in the Health and Human Services Department is trying to push for this. They have people from the Justice Department working on the legal end of this. He has got to be aware that this is going on. Why would a champion of the poor and a champion of the people also be fighting to have economically and social deprived children the victim of human testing? Again, excuse me. Why would that be the case? We definitely need to take a long, hard look at that, don't we? We definitely need to know why this would even be allowed. What is it that's going on here? If you don't want to be compared to Hitler, number one, stop being such a leftist. You know, the folks on the left like to say the folks on the right are the Nazis. Now, the Nazi Party started as a labor union and became a political force later. If you don't like the comparisons to Hitler, stop doing the things Hitler did, like right before you demanded all the guns be taken away from the hands of the citizens, took all the little children out in front of you for all your photo ops and said, well, it's for the children, we must do this. Yeah, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to keep blaming Congress because I can't blame George W. anymore. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message. The message of, it's Congress's fault. The message of, it's time for you, the American people, to tell them to do what I said. You re-elected me. I won. Ha ha ha. Only, he stole the election. Those election results are not accurate. We know he stole the election. The American people did not re-elect this guy. He may have won the first one. A lot of white guilt. He did not win this one. It's clear. He's lying to you. The mainstream media is lying to you. And he's trying to deflect his critics. Ladies and gentlemen, that is tonight's show. Thanks for listening, and I hope that we'll be back real soon, and hope you'll listen again. Good night, everybody. And stay safe out there for friends and neighbors in the surrounding counties who are facing Snowmageddon. Good night, everybody.